What is up, everybody? Matt Perino, NYUpSyracuse.com, coming to you from inside the Buffalo Bills practice facility in the media room here, 2 days out now from Bills versus Patriots. The showdown for the division. That's not really for the division because the Bills have to win on Saturday and need some help next week, a win and a Patriots loss to the Dolphins. I'm joined by Jon Scott from Spectrum Sports. He is their Bills beat reporter. So this weekend, this game, it's a big one in a lot of different ways. Obviously, we could talk about the team stuff, but one centralized point is I talked to you about it earlier today as I was reading something from that came out of New England from one of the writers there. I thought it was a really good story about how the Bills are nipping at the heels of the Patriots and their dynasty. And one line in particular really stood out to me, and I think that's what I want to start on and focus on. And that's that the only question mark about where the Bills are as a franchise is at quarterback. And the writer, really good writer, Andrew Callahan from the Boston Globe, from the Boston Herald, he mentioned that he used the comparison to Mark Sanchez and the Jets earlier in the decade when the Jets had a really good team, a really good defense, and it was Mark Sanchez ultimately that maybe they misevaluated quite a bit. Now we sit here with Josh, and we could talk about all of the progression that he's made, but I want to start on that simple point. With 2 games left this season and then into the playoffs, is Josh Allen going to be a detriment to this team winning and advancing in the playoffs?
I don't think he's going to be a detriment. I have, however, been saying since, frankly, before training camp started, maybe all the way back to OTAs, this year's team will go as far as Josh Allen takes them. I've felt that way throughout, and by and large, I think that has been playing out. We saw the first New England game. The defense played really well. They were in that game. Ultimately, Josh got hurt, but the offense was struggling, and Josh had his worst game. In Philadelphia, against Philadelphia, I should say, they didn't play that well offensively, and he didn't have a great game. Against the Ravens, he struggled until later in the game. That doesn't mean that losses and or wins are all pinned on Josh Allen and that there are not other areas, especially offensively, that they can improve upon beyond this season. But the quarterback is the most important position, and Josh's development appears to be a more flat incline, if that makes sense, instead of the rocket ship trajectory that we've seen out of guys like Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson to some extent, even though he's just more of a playmaker. His quarterbacking skills, I think people could easily say Josh Allen is just as good, if not better. So I don't disagree with the thought of the Bills' defense is Super Bowl caliber and their offense is playoff caliber, and the difference between bringing the offense up to where the defense is stellar quarterback play. But I would never say that Josh Allen is a detriment. I think Josh Allen makes plays for this offense that maybe don't show up on a stat sheet that an outsider like a guy from the Boston Herald or any other national media outlet that hasn't had the opportunity to watch this team week in and week out like we have. I think if you just purely look at his statistics, you don't see the plays individually that he makes that even sometimes aren't even going to show up on a stat sheet that help this offense be better than maybe what they always are.
Mm-hmm. And, I think to piggyback off of that, one of the things that I don't think people outside of the market realize, too, is the impact that he has in the locker room. And there's a lot to be said for that because at the end of the day, you could tell a guy like John Feliciano or a guy like Cole Beasley who has a belief or feeds off of Josh Allen, the leader, probably elevates their level of play. How many guys on this offense are playing above their talent level because of the influencer Josh Allen or because they kind of, to use a cliche, want to run through a wall for the guy? Also, he's a dynamic player in the sense that no matter who you play, no matter what defensive coordinator you go up against, no matter what kind of defensive scheme you go against, you have to plan for both areas. And I think where things kind of went off course for him in the first game, and he spoke about it this week, is he wanted to make all the plays, and he didn't have enough trust in everybody around him. I thought that the Pittsburgh game was a great precursor to this one for him personally, because he really had to go in and almost have a dress rehearsal for how he has to play against the Patriots. Don't take any chances. Don't put the ball in harm's way. I mean, that one throw where he threw off balance across his body, that one interception against the Patriots, that's the one that we've seen over the last 2 years consistently that we haven't really seen in this now 10-game run, 15 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. That sample size is large enough and good enough to where I agree. I don't think that he's a detriment. I think that this team feeds off him.
And it's funny, when immediately after the Patriots game, obviously he got knocked out of that game. So the story was, how is he going to learn from that experience in regards to his running? It looks like, and Josh has admitted, the biggest learning curve he's hit from that game is really prioritizing taking care of the football and not trying to do everything. And again, you're right. He had 3 picks in that game, a career high, and he's had 3 interceptions in 10 games since. And they've played some really, really good defenses. And just because he throws for 150 yards, I think you can't focus as much on what he didn't do in regards to passing production. I think we need to focus more so on what he didn't do in regards of turning the football over. Because with a defense like this, that is what is almost as important as driving the ball down the field, whether it be with his legs or his arms. So, yeah, I think Josh is continuing to evolve, and it's been something I will admit I've had to adjust to, just accepting that maybe his progression is at a different pace than other quarterbacks have in recent memory around the league that vault themselves into that quote-unquote elite franchise category. But that does not mean he's not taking strides forward, and it doesn't mean he eventually won't get there. And there's nothing wrong with if it takes him maybe an extra year to get there, because they're still winning. And that's ultimately where quarterbacks get the boot, is when the production and the win totals aren't there, and that forces a team to move on. And as is the case, they're 10-4. That's not the case here with Josh.
And when he gets there, the team will then be built up to where it's going to be. I mean, I don't think there's enough talk about the amount of, well, there is locally, $90 million in cap space, 9 draft picks coming up in 2020. I mean, there's still an ability to substantially upgrade this roster going into next season when you're talking about, you know, Tom Brady and this New England offense that are going into an offseason with plenty of question marks. The only question is, how good of a, you know, number 1 receiver can the Bills go out and get Josh Allen? A.J. Green's going to be potentially be a free agent. I mean, obviously, we'll cover all that down the road. But I think one of the things, you know, biggest difference from week 4 to now is the continuity on the offensive line, all of the new weapons that Josh Allen is going to have at his disposal in this game. He didn't have Devin Singletary, and that may be the most important one, because this, you saw what Cincinnati, a mediocre run team, did to the New England Patriots last week. You get Devin Singletary, who's now fully healthy in this game. You saw Tyler Kroft break out with a big touchdown catch to win the game last week. What did that do for his confidence? What does that add to this this offense that, as good as Dawson Knox has been in spurts, still is a rookie that, you know, I don't know how much faith you're going to have in him in a big game like this. And I'm not saying he's not going to make plays, because he could. But I think that that's one of the biggest things going in this, like moving on to previewing this game. That's where I think things start for this offense, are the differences from that first game.
Well, and we've seen the Bills' offense, albeit not last week, because that's not how they chose to go against that defense. But they have changed their tempo and their style of play almost completely since that first New England game. They went back to more of the traditional multiple power looks against Pittsburgh, because that's how they felt was the best way to combat that great defense, and they won the game. So we've seen them now win by going up-tempo, no huddle a lot. They didn't do it at all against Pittsburgh, went back to more so what we saw the first New England game, and they were successful enough to do that. And that was a game you could even sense, and Brian Dable, even with like that questionable call, third and goal from the 15, a draw play, and I was very critical of it. And he's admitted afterwards it was based on the game. Like, that's what they felt they needed to do.
Which, you and I, fans at home, I think I tweeted out what an atrocious six play calls, leading up to that. And of course, it's in the moment, it's emotional. They are paid not to be that. And they knew going up against that Doug Hodges and the way that he played in the first half, every point was critical. So in hindsight, I retract that evaluation in the moment because he was right. And they got the win. Now, if they didn't get the win, I guess it might be a little different.
I still think if it's 3rd and 15 and you have faith in your quarterback, you should at least take a shot. That's still my opinion, even though it ultimately worked out. But what I want to say about the New England game is you may see moments like that to where the throwaway, the punt, the field position, the conservative play calling, you may see spurts of that depending upon the ebbs and flows of the game, because while in the past you've thought you're going to have to score with New England, I don't particularly think, at least from what I've seen, that's necessarily going to be the case this weekend in Foxborough. I think it may be more of a similar setting and style of game we saw a week ago in Pittsburgh, to where you take the points when you can get them and you just avoid mistakes, and that's ultimately going to be the difference in the game. I was just looking at the numbers. The last game earlier this year in September, Brady's played in 283 regular season games. It was the 6th worst quarterback rating he's ever had. The 8th worst quarterback rating he's ever had was the last time they played him last season. So the past 2 games that the Bills defense has played Tom Brady, he's had his 8th worst ever and 6th worst ever quarterback rating out of 283 games. And I know McDermott joked when someone asked him earlier in the week, some people seem to think you figured out Brady. He understands he hasn't. I would never say that he's figured Brady out, but the numbers Tom Brady's had in 34 career games against the Bills are nowhere near what he's had against this franchise since Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier have been at the helm of the defense. Part of it may be they're catching him slowly on the downtick, but I think they've also are a good enough group that even against the greatest of all time, we've seen Brady be challenged in figuring out the answers to the test from start to finish, and it takes him a lot longer. So I think it's going to be a low-scoring game, and I don't think you ever shut down Tom Brady, but the Bills' defense under Sean McDermott has come about as close as you can to doing that.
And the key is, I watched Tom Brady's press conference before we started too, and you saw his, a little smirk when he was asked about Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. Most quarterbacks that are set to play the Bills probably aren't nearly as familiar as Tom Brady is with him, and I think that's what got him to smile a little bit. They do such a good job of disguising their coverages and confusing. And how good are they? How often do you confuse Tom Brady? Sean McDermott said it, or Sean or Brian said it this week. He's seen pretty much everything on a football field because he's played for so long. But I think that the key to this to one of the keys to this game is how last week, as good as this defense has been this year, and they've been great, they turned the ball over. If you can go on the road against New England, turn the ball over, give Josh Allen a short field, maybe take some of the pressure off of him in this offense early on, that's when I think that you really set yourself up to pull off a road upset like that, because you need something special to happen. Almost like the Patriots were in reverse. It was a special teams play like you mentioned, but something that kind of stunts, the progression of the natural progression of the game and places some pressure back on their side of things and even their coaching staff.
Brady's 3 touchdowns to 5 interceptions in those 5 games since McDermott and Leslie Frazier have been here. I think he's gone 3 games without even throwing a touchdown, but he's thrown interceptions, if not in all 4 of the 5 games, including the last one earlier this year, which you talk about disguising and confusing Tom Brady. That's exactly what Micah Hyde did in that interception in the end zone to stop one of their drives. Yeah, I agree with you. The Bills defense, as great as they were early in the season, they weren't getting to the quarterback and they weren't producing turnovers. Since they've done a great job with the emergence of Shaq Lawson, Ed Oliver, and Jordan Phillips at getting to the quarterback. And then last week, they really produced turnovers. And their magic number, Tre'Davious White said at the beginning of the year, is 2. And I think if they can get 2 turnovers and Josh and the offense can have none or maybe one, I think if whoever wins the turnover battle likely will win the game.
So just a little housekeeping here. If the Bills win this game in New England, it will be the first time in the Tom Brady era that the Bills will win in Foxborough in a game that Tom Brady started and finished, because he got pulled for Jimmy Garoppolo when the game didn't matter, and then he didn't play in the Jacoby Brissett game.
He was suspended.
Exactly. But 15-0 lifetime Tom Brady. And this is a game where, if it has the complexion like it could, in a game where I'll tell you right now, there is a sense of confidence in this locker room. And, part of it is the 10 wins, but part of it is the way they've gotten there. And it starts with Dallas. It starts with Tennessee, who has been one of the hotter teams in the league. The Bills went on the road, and yes, it was Marcus Mariota, but they still have that defense, and they still played the kind of blueprint to a game that they're going to need in a game like this. And then last week against Pittsburgh, that offense was really bad, but that defense was really good. And I think that if they can replicate some of those things, we'll see how it plays out. But prediction time.
I think it's going to be a low-scoring game, and I've heard people use this phrase, and I'm going to piggyback on it. Until they do it, I can't confidently say they're going to. So I think it's going to be something 17-14. New England's going to take it, even though they've had a heck of a time with kickers. So maybe getting that 3-point win could be challenging. But again, I think it comes down to turnovers. I think it's going to be a grind them out kind of game. And I think, as only the Patriots and Tom Brady do in December, especially at home, I think they find a way to do it. And this game is looked at more as another measuring stick of how close things are between these two teams and how close the Bills are in totality to joining that next group at the top of the conference as a Super Bowl contender. But I don't think that they are there yet offensively. And again, that's not saying Josh is a detriment. I just think as a whole, offensively, they are not there enough to challenge what likely is the best defense in the NFL enough to get the win.
So we're on so many radio shows and this and that. We're asked to pick every day, and I picked New England yesterday. But I think after really thinking about where all of this sits heading into this game and what I think the Bills are going to do, I think it's going to be a run-heavy approach, very similar to, I believe it was the Denver game where they went for 40 carries. I think it's going to be between Devin Singletary and Frank Gore. I think they're going to really try to pound the ball, and that's where I think this offensive line is at its best. And I think when they do that, as you saw in the Denver game, it gives them confidence in the passing game, allows Josh Allen to make enough plays to be successful. And I think that this defense, listen, I know it's Tom Brady, and you never want to write him off, but I think this defense is going to do enough to get the job done. And I think they'll score. It'll be the first to 20 again, just like it was last week, and I think it'll be 21-17 Bills. I might change my mind before the preview. It's funny. I was on the money last week with the Steelers prediction. I changed that pick every day of the week. Different team, different score, all the way up. But that's kind of what this team now represents. It's such a new world that we're living in, with a competitive Bills team and a team that, I don't want to say its identity is changing from week to week, but the what it's capable of. I feel like those expectations change week by week.
It is uncharted territory for this franchise to be even talking playoffs entering week 16 of the regular season, to already have their ticket punched, and now realistically discussing the division. That is really new territory for this team, this franchise, and I agree with you when it comes to the confidence. They not only believe they can win, They believe that they're one of the best, and they believe that this is just the beginning of their time to maybe join the echelon of New England, not for a year, but for a very extended period of time.
All right, he is Jon Scott. I am Matt Perino. Thank you so much for listening. You can find him at Jon Scott TV on Twitter. Is that correct?
Correct.
And I'm at Matt Perino for all your Bills content. Check him out over on Spectrum, and as always, nyupsyracuse.com.